Why do we fight? To protect home and family, to preserve balance and bring harmony. For my kind, the true question is, what is worth fighting for?
Hello guys, this is Donan's Movies, and welcome to the Monk World of Warcraft role-playing guide. This one is going to be a bit different since the monks, even though lore-wise they're an ancient class, they're also a new class to World of Warcraft and most of the world pretty much outside of Pandaria, so I won't exactly go to like each specific race because apart from Pandaren, pretty much most races are exactly the same, even though there are a few exceptions that I will mention later on in the video. So, without further ado, let's get into the lore. Obviously, the first question is, who are the monks? In short, they're warriors with immense amount of training and dedication. Many of them have mastered both defense and offense and are experts in hand-to-hand combat. But then you would ask, how exactly is that different from warriors? I mean, they both train and fight, that's pretty much what they do. Well, in a lot of cultures, warriors are just like regular citizens, like regular people who just have to defend themselves in some way, unless they're like professional fighters, gladiators, mercenaries or such. But in most cases, that isn't really their way of life. While when it comes to the monks, in order to truly be a monk, you have to be dedicated to the monk lifestyle, and that has to be like your way of life. While other classes put their faith in the light or manipulate arcane magic, the monk put their faith into themselves and manipulate their own spirit, also known as chi. And by this point you've probably heard the word chi either in real life or in Warcraft, because the Warcraft chi is based on like the real world thing. And it is a really wide term and not really explained to detail, but the easiest way for you to understand what it is in the game is just to think of it as the spirit. Now, each person has their own spirit, but almost none can actually manipulate it like the monks can, and it takes a great amount of dedication and just like truly understanding yourself and like fully conquering your spirit in order to bend it to your will. Now, the spirit itself can be used in many ways. For example, they can channel it into like a punch and do something like no average person could do, like breaking through stone or armor or something like ridiculous where they could like fight with their bare hands. They can also heal or mend their wounds through the use of spirit. Now, the shamans actually do something similar to this, but it works a bit different through the elements, and they first need a favor from the elements in order to actually do something, while the monks really search for the spirits within themselves. Okay, so now that you understand how the monks work, you should also know how they were originally created and what was the reason behind it. A long time ago, the Mogu ruled the land of Pandaria, and they had many enslaved races, one of them being the Pandaren. They built their walls, structures, and pretty much everything the Mogu requested or ordered them to do. And the Mogu themselves weren't exactly good rulers. I mean, they abused their slaves, they forced them to do immense amounts of work, and generally just mistreated them in any way possible, definitely not to like any working rules. However, they did allow them some basic healing and use of herbs that later on turned into the Pandaren specializing in healing and brewing, and later on that created the brewmasters as we knew today. But on the other side, the Mogu decided to become even more cruel than they already were, because their punishment for the Pandaren, for whoever pretty much displeased their masters, was not to just simply kill them, but instead actually kill their family or separate their family. Now, this actually happened to one of the first monks known as Kang, and his children were sent to the Serpent Spine, where they would get devoured by the Mantid Swarm. If you don't know what it is, it's pretty much the wall that separates it near the Mantid lair. And of course, Kang was just filled with grief, and in that moment he actually realized something, and that is that the Mogu were actually weak. I mean, sure, they were big, powerful, had all these weapons and magics they used, but their entire empire was just based on slave labor, and in reality they were the minority and the slaves were the majority, so only if the slaves united, the Mogu can be defeated. Since the Pandaren weren't allowed to have any weapons in order to defeat the Mogu, Kang realized that the Pandaren have to become the weapon themselves. He started practicing martial arts and soon most of the slaves were taught the ways of the monk, of course in secret far away from the eyes of their Mogu masters. Once all of them have been organized and they were ready, they rebelled. Of course, the Mogu were completely caught off guard and just surprised by the general speed of the Pandaren because they haven't really seen them fight before. Now, the Slave Watchers were the first one to get mowed down by the rebellion as they had like these giant clunky weapons that, apart from the entire scare factor that were going to stop the entire rebellion, which obviously didn't, their weapons were completely useless against the speed of the monks and they were quite easily overpowered. Alright, so long story short, the Pandaren freed themselves and the Mogu Empire slowly fell apart and almost everyone forgot about them. And with that you kinda get the general idea why the monks are so important within the Pandaren culture and just the general history of the Pandaren. In the game there are 3 different specs, the Brewmaster, the Windwalker and the Mistweaver, but unlike some races these aren't really that wide apart except maybe the Brewmasters, who in a way can be a class on their own or a subclass on its own, but generally Windwalker and Mistweaver are pretty much the same, just like you have like a Retribution or a Protection Pellet. However, there are different combat styles and it all depends on where the monk was trained, because you have these 4 big temples around Pandaria based on the Augusta Celestials, which is an entire story on its own. I will probably make a video in the near future. So, based on the Augusta Celestials, you have 4 different styles. You have the Tiger style, mainly based on agility and strength, as in delivering like powerful and lethal blows, but also being really agile and fast. Next you have the Ox style, which focuses on endurance and the ability to just take hits without taking damage, so essentially that will be like a monk tank. Next one you have the Serpent, and this one is a bit different from the others. It is about using the advanced Chi energy mainly for healing and mending wounds. And last you have the Crane style, which is pretty much quite similar to the Serpent style, but he has various different like spinning or flying kicks or all sorts of these different moves. The main thing you should really remember though is that all these so-called subclasses aren't really subclasses on their own, they're just like monks with different training styles that depend on the location of the temple where they were trained at, mainly based on what is needed in order to defeat the Shah in that area. Alright, that is all there is for the backstory. Now let's just talk a bit about the actual RP part and what you can really do as a monk. Now the first and the most obvious tip, and something I would just give as a tip to like anyone new to roleplay, is don't make a monk and pretend to be like a super wise master monk, like a teacher or something like that knows everything there is in the world, because at this point the only race that can really be a master monk are the Pandaren. But even as a Pandaren, unless you have like a full understanding of the class, just don't try to be like a master, as an entire superhero in roleplay is quite a common noobish mistake, and it is something I also made when I got into roleplaying. Just try to avoid it at all costs. Now this is something a lot of people ask me, and that is about the other races that are monks. Now when it comes to the other races, most of them were introduced to the ways of the monk only in the last few years, so almost all of them are just apprentices. There's like no like undead like monk experts or something like that. Now you're probably wondering is how are there those like Scarlet Monastery monks that you meet in the dungeon? Now that is a completely different case and a totally rare thing that doesn't happen really often. Apparently there was like this wandering monk, just like you had Shen Stormstout, that taught one of the humans the ways of the monk, and then he taught the other humans in the Scarlet Monastery, and then you have like an entire Scarlet Monastery like order of the monk. But I wouldn't really consider them masters in any way, and it is all sort of like apprentice stuff. It isn't really anything like crazy. But I definitely won't suggest something like this for like your actual like roleplay backstory, as in you were taught by this wandering Pandaren, because they are so like super rare, and on top of that, if you even somehow manage to meet like a Pandaren, I don't really think you would just like teach random people something that takes like years and years and like complete dedication to actually learn. So if you're an experienced roleplayer and for some reason you decide to roleplay like a master monk, just make sure you actually pick the Pandaren. Don't try to be like a human, like a monk master or like an orc monk master. Another thing you can also do is like organize with a few other monks or like a few other role players and like roleplay as their teacher and teach them the ways of the monk. Pretty much like opening your own like monk school, and that is actually something you can even do for a guild. You can like create a small guild like a monk school and just like get some other people in. But just be careful, it takes some experience in roleplay to actually decently pull this off. Alright, that is all I have for this video. Now, I only have the hunters and the rogues left in this series, so I will try to finish that up as soon as possible. After that, I might do some role-playing tip videos if you guys are interested, and just feel free to leave your suggestions for those on like what you would like to see. And also don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not subscribed to the channel already, as it really helps out the channel and keeps all the videos going. And thanks a lot for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and see you next time.